Hey friends, my name is Richie and welcome back to my channel, Gender Not Found. So I know I said I was gonna read the book that I've been working on, prologue in chapter 1, but first of all, I'm not done with chapter 1 quite yet. I'm gonna try and finish it in the next day or two. And second of all, I just want to continue reading this book because I'm really enjoying it. So there's that. And my mental health has been really low lately because my sister is having some issues, and right now she is staying with my mom because nothing my mom says holds any weight. You know, so yeah, there was that. So that's why I've been trying to upload every day. Well, that and I just enjoy reading this book, and I want to keep reading more chapters for you guys. And I know I have a fan, Kelly Loomis, who's really enjoying this book. I know as well. I keep tagging this other guy in my videos, but I, he rarely drops by. I haven't seen him in a while, so I don't know. I guess he's not around, but I've had fans disappear in the past for no discernible reason, just because they don't care anymore or whatever. So anyway, I'm gonna record like 5 chapters, and this is gonna be the first upload. And because I have that mouse mover thingy, what I've been doing is I've been recording like later in the day, and then I've been posting at night, like while I'm sleeping, and so basically, I just leave my computer plugged in and I leave things open and I let the video upload. Like, I just click upload before I go to bed and I edit the video. Like, I put in the stuff that I need to put in, I tag whoever I need to tag, and then I just leave it to upload while I'm in bed because it takes forever. And then I'm not just sitting around wasting time because, I'm actually sleeping. So, the computer is doing its thing and I'm recharging, and then when I come back next day, I'm ready to record more videos. Yay. Oh, actually, hang on. I'm gonna pause this for a quick second. I just had to refill my water. So also I'm gonna be home recording tomorrow. I know tomorrow's Tuesday, and usually I go to the movies sometime in the evening, but I don't have any money in my account, and I'm not getting any money in my account until Wednesday, so I'm probably gonna go to the movies, probably Thursday, either Thursday or Friday or something like that, because there's a movie out that I want to see right now, but I don't have any money in my account, and I did move some over from my savings account to get groceries and stuff, because, but my mom got sick, and there was this stuff that I was supposed to get my money back for because I got ripped off on a bunch of stuff, and this was like a year ago. Like when I was on my shopping spree with my victims comp, I bought this thing that I got ripped off for, and then in December when I found out I was moving out, I wanted to do something for myself, so I bought a really expensive like duvet cover of a bearded dragon. That never showed up either. I sent them several emails. They have not responded to anything. And the last email I sent them, it says that they are not available anymore. Like my email bounced back because I looked them up online and their shop is still open with all its duvet covers and everything. And my mom was gonna help me out with that, but then she got sick, so we didn't get a chance to. Anyway, so that's how my time has been going. My mom's got sick last Saturday. Luckily, the other day she was able to come over and we had our normal Saturday together. And by normal, I mean like the 6 hours. We didn't bother going to her place or anything because, well, first of all, my sister's there. And second of all, my mom just didn't want to, and I just didn't want to. And we just sat and watched my TV. So we watched the Better Call Saul series finale. I know. I'm late to the party, okay? Don't even get me started. We were supposed to watch it together when my mom got sick, but it came out on the 15th. Then last Saturday she got sick, and then this Saturday she came over and we finally watched it. Like almost 2 weeks after it came out, alright? So there was nothing I could do, okay? She came down with COVID suddenly. It came as a shock to me too because I had just seen her the day before and she seemed fine. But luckily, my sister and I have not gotten sick. So, and it's been over a week, so I'm very doubtful that we will get sick. But, I mean, I don't know. It may still happen, but I'm seriously doubtful of the chances of us getting sick, which is good because for me it's not that much of a problem because I have my vaccines and stuff, but my sister doesn't have any of her vaccinations due to a needle phobia. So anyway, I think we're just gonna move on from that and I'm gonna get into the actual reading because it's already 8:30. Holy shit. Sheesh. Holy sheesh. Okay. I'm really curious. Alright. Chapter 63, A Crippling Blow. Oh no, it says it's rated M for graphic violence and gore. Okay, well then. Finn didn't mind his new job, and if it wasn't for his dad, he wouldn't have it. They were a company that built community buildings with the help of volunteers in cities that needed them. From what he could recall, it was to help the troubled youth of the area have somewhere to be. It was a weird mission, but because it was something his dad supported, and because the company was paying him, Finn felt the need to help them out. It had been late and the volunteers had left. His father, Steve, had taken the first work truck back, and after some coaxing, Finn convinced him to go on ahead, that he could finish packing the second truck and would catch up with him in minutes. For the first time ever, his father didn't question it. He just accepted and told Finn to meet him at the gas station down the street, and the blonde agreed. There wasn't much left to do. He just had to put away the rest of the tools and take everything off of the buzzsaw table, and take that apart and put it away. It would take 5 minutes tops for him to do all that. He walked around, finding tools left and right and putting them back in the compartments on the work truck, pausing the moment he thought he heard something. Standing there, Finn listened intently to the surroundings, feeling the hair on the back of his neck stand up. He could hear the sound of cars passing by on the main road a few streets away, but that wasn't what he thought he'd heard. It was more like a shuffling sound coming from the wooded area. He strained his ears to hear anything else, but the sound didn't return. Keeping his ears open, he walked back towards the generator, unplugging the extension cord, watching as the red light on the saw's table went out, and winding it up as he walked back towards the saw. Again he heard the sound, only this time coming from behind him, and quickly dropping the cord, he turned, spotting several figures coming out of the shadows, every one of them wearing a mask with a different animal's face on it, and the sight made him beyond nervous. Taking several steps backwards, and quickly looking behind him, he spotted 3 more and 2 to his left, too. There were 9 of them, all eerily silent and ominous, until finally the one in the bear mask spoke. "You're Finn Wright, formerly Mertens, correct?" the man asked, and feeling that confirming what they already knew would be a hugely bad idea, Finn stayed silent, trying to figure a way out of this mess he'd gotten himself into. In the wake of his silence, the man continued, "You're the younger brother of the leader of the Bloodhounds, and we'd like you to give him a message for us." Finn could hear the sinister smile in the man's voice. This was bad. This was very, very bad. The most concerning thing was that the only space to run is if that's what he ended up doing, was right by the saw, and Finn had the sickening feeling that that's where they wanted him to be, where the saw was. That point was never clearer when he saw the once dead light on the buzzsaw's table begin to glow a bright red. Someone had plugged it back in. This was more than just bad. If these people wanted to give a message to Jake, it could very well mean his life. He was fast. He could run pretty fast, but these people, being so outnumbered, was unnerving. He wanted to run. Every fiber of his being was telling him to run like the wind, like Jake had always told him to do. But one solid thought stopped him. He couldn't outrun a bullet, and these guys, or at least some of them, probably had guns. Swallowing hard, Finn kept the tremor in his voice at bay as he spoke. His father might come looking for him, and maybe if someone showed up, then he could get out of here. Maybe if he could keep them talking. "What's the message?" he asked stiffly, his body tight with anticipation, ready to spring into action if he had to escape. "It's really something that can't be put into words," the man said, stepping forward, the rest of the group following suit. "This is bad. This is really, really, really bad. These people are gonna kill me," Finn thought nervously, hearing the words spoken from the man in the bear mask. His instincts were telling him to stay. The feeling of intense fear and panic was telling him to run. He wanted to run. He had to run. He ran. Finn was right. He was fast, but not fast enough to outrun all of them. By the time one clamped onto his arm, he was slowed enough for a larger man in an eerie-looking rabbit's mask to wrench him back. Holding his arms behind him, his face was slammed down on the only thing left in the clearing. His eyes were clenched shut, and still the red light of the saw was burning through Finn's closed eyes. Opening his eyes, he was face to face with the saw's blade only inches away. His heart was violently pounding in his chest as he began to struggle, feeling the pervasive sense of fear and panic coursing through him. Finn watched the same man who'd spoken before walk over to where the switch was, his finger near the small lever. Scorcher was a friend of ours, you see. You may have stabbed him, but it was your brother's orders that had him killed. A life for a life seems more than fair, he said, flicking the switch, turning the saw's blade on. With Steve. It had been 15 minutes, and Steve had just finished filling the gas tank on the wood truck when his phone rang, and with a sense of ease he pulled out the phone, and recognizing the ringtone as Jake's, he flipped the phone, holding it against his head. "Hello, my son." "Oh, Glob, Dad, don't do that. You sound like some kind of weird priest," Jake said as his father laughed. "What's up, kiddo?" he asked, putting the gas hose back as he screwed the cap onto the tank. "I've been trying to call Finn, but he's not picking up. Where is he?" "He's back at the worksite loading the other truck. I went to get gas down the street." "Dad, come on! You never leave him alone, and you go and do it the one time he's not answering the phone, really?" he asked anxiously. Tiffany's warning had been bothering him all day today for some reason, and the one time his dad doesn't stay with him, Finn doesn't pick up the phone. Something had to be wrong. "Jake, he's fine. He should be here any minute," Steve said in a reassuring voice. "Dad, I really need you to trust me on this, and please just find my brother," Jake said sternly. "Jake, is something wrong?" Steve asked, scratching his chin and feeling the scruff under his fingers as he leaned against the truck. Something was off in his son's voice. "Okay, don't get mad. The gang stopped by my house to give a warning a few weeks ago. They said that some stuff had been going on near where you guys have been working lately, and knowing that Finn was there, Dad, he's pretty recognizable. Everybody knows he's my brother. Okay, I'll go back and find him, okay?" "Okay, thanks, Dad." Steve let out a sigh. He knew that Jake's old life would always follow him. It wasn't something that the boy could control, but knowing that he'd done all he could to get out of it, Steve just couldn't get mad at him for that, not even when it caused problems. But with that warning that people had been around their building sites, that concerned him because they'd had several, which means that they'd been followed. Climbing into the truck, he headed back to where Finn was that all of this newfound hoping that all of this newfound worry was for nothing. He could feel the wind from the spinning blade on his face and gritted his teeth, trying not to scream. He struggled against their hold, digging his feet into the ground as the man holding him in place pushed his face towards the saw. He pulled his arms frantically, the buzzing of the saw loud in his ears. He could feel the dirt slipping underneath his sneakers as he continued pulling against the hands that held his arms back. Finally, he wrenched an arm free. He didn't have to think about it. He just moved, doing what he had to do because the choice now was life or limb, and he chose life. His arm came up to block his face, and he screamed, feeling the white-hot pain jolt through his body as the saw blade tore through his forearm. He could feel pain, then nothing in his arm. He was screaming, on the ground, screaming at the top of his lungs. The people were gone, but the sound of the saw was still loud in his ears. He didn't want to look at it. The very thought of what his arm looked like was horrifying to him, but as he held it tightly against his chest, he could feel the hot blood pooling on his shirt as he grew lightheaded. He could see bright lights approaching him, and Finn's first thoughts were that they'd just decided to run him over. With his good arm, he pushed back, scrambling away from the headlights as black spots began to overwhelm his vision. Suddenly, everything went black as he heard a voice call his name. His dad was here. Steve had been around the corner when he could hear the screams, and the sound made his heart stop. His son had never, in the time he'd lived with them, made a sound even remotely close to that. It was then he could hear the whirring sound of the saw and made the terrifying connection. Pulling into the build site, the sight of his son on the ground terrified him. Finn was covered in blood. "Finn! Dad, it hurts! It hurts!" he sobbed. "I know. Okay, you'll be okay," Steve said, looking around as he pulled his belt from the loops of his pants. Quickly he wrapped it around his son's arm, pulling it tight above the wound, watching the flow of the blood slow down. Finn was scarily pale, and taking his shirt off, Steve wiped his hands and wrapped it around Finn's arm. Remembering Jake's warning, the brunette continued scanning the area as he tended to his son. "I'm going to stand up, and you need to not pass out on me, Finn, okay?" he said, taking his son's good arm. "Can you try not to do that?" I'll try, he said, taking in a shuddering breath, unable to hold back his sobs. Okay, up in three. One, Finn braced himself for the pain the movement would cause. Two, Steve wrapped his arm around Finn's shoulders, preparing for the inevitable. Three, Finn screamed. Any form of movement sent pain jolting up his arm, but his father was quick to move him to the truck. Walking over to the saw, he grabbed the power cord and jerked it against the blade, permanently silencing it before he made his way back to the truck. Turning the high beams on, Steve felt his blood chill. He could make out the forms of several people deep in the woods. They had been watching the entire time as his son had been bleeding out. Almost immediately, he could hear Finn's panicked breaths pick up. Oh, Glob, they never left. I want to leave, Dad. Let's just go. I want to go, Blonde said in a panicked and pained voice. Without another word, the truck was slammed into reverse as he headed towards the hospital, flipping open his phone to call them so they'd be prepared. The other line rang, but he ignored it. It's bad, isn't it? Finn asked in a shaky voice as his eyes grew heavy, feeling relief that he was with the man who'd always seemed to be saving him. You'll be fine, Finn. You'll be fine. Dad, it hurts, he choked out through gritted teeth as they swerved to avoid a pothole. I know it does, but we're almost at the hospital. They'll fix everything, the brunette said firmly, still ignoring his ringing phone. I did it because I didn't want to die. I don't want to die, he sobbed. Finn, you're not going to die. I promise you'll be okay. Everything's going to be okay. I'm so tired. Finn, do not go to sleep. I'm trying, but it's hard and it hurts. Dad, it hurts so much and I'm just so tired, he whined, continuing to hold his arm tightly. I know, Finn, I know, he said, bringing a hand to the blonde's head in loving reassurance. But we're here, and those people right there are going to help you, okay? You're going to go with them, and I have to park the truck, but I'll be right in, okay? He said, parking the truck at the emergency entrance, and running around to Finn's side immediately crowded by the hospital staff. He's lost a lot of blood, but he's blood type AB. There's also a makeshift tourniquet above the wound, he said to the nurse who nodded as they helped his son onto the stretcher. He watched as they entered the hospital in a flurry of activity before climbing into the truck and finding a spot to park. Again, his phone began ringing. It was the sixth time in a row now. It was the sixth time in a row now, and answering it, he was a little more than angry. Never had he held Jake's past against him, but this was a whole different level. Pulling Finn into this, endangering him because of a lifestyle that Steve wasn't even positive that Jake quit completely. It wasn't right to be angry with Jake that Finn was hurt like he was, but for the first time, Steve couldn't help it. Knowing that his anger was misplaced, he answered the phone and spoke only one sentence that left deafening silence on the other line. Finn's in the hospital and he's lost a lot of blood. I have to go. With that said, he hung up and dialed his wife. He listened, trying to think of what he could tell her and how, so she wouldn't freak out. Hi, sweetie. I was wondering what's taking you and Finn so long. Did you get a flat tire? Ellen asked. Ellie, I need you to sit. Oh, Glob, what happened? She immediately asked in a hushed voice. Finn's been hurt badly. He's in the emergency room right now. Stephen, what happened? Tell me what happened. Ellen, I'll explain it to you when you get here, okay? I need to go inside and be with Finn. Go do that. I'll be down when Fiona gets out of the shower. We'll see you soon. You're at Memorial? Mount Ashburn. Okay. With that done, he walked into the hospital to find his son. The pain he was in was ridiculous, but the one thing Finn had to be thankful for were the powerful pain medications that they injected him with after putting the IV in his inner left arm. His body was officially numb, and the medications made his brain just as fuzzy. He could still feel the pain, but instead of the sharp jabs of pain, it was now a low, dull ache. Nurses and doctors were in and out of his little sectioned off curtained cubicle. They were poking him, prodding him, and asking him all sorts of questions that he was in no right mind to answer. When his dad entered, it was a welcome relief, and with him came the person who hung a red bag on his IV stand, pulling it into the port in his arm, just like the pain medication had been. Dad, I'm so tired. You have to stay awake just a bit longer, okay? Okay. If Ember shows up, I didn't cry, okay? Hearing this, Steve tried not to laugh as he once again brought his hand to his youngest son's head. Okay, I'll let her know that you took a buzzsaw to the arm like a champ. For the first time, Finn grinned. Awesome. Actually, I don't want her to see me in here at all. I'll be sure that she won't, Finn. Good. He was starting to doze. He was barely paying attention, but he could make out bits and pieces of the conversation between his father and the doctors. They were moving him somewhere, and he watched as his father signed a form on a clipboard. They were quick to move him, and as he glanced around, he spotted his mother and sister in a passing glance before going through a pair of double doors. He was fitted with a mask, and the nurse began talking to him. I want you to start counting backwards from 10, okay? She said, watching as he nodded. 10? He hadn't even finished the word when sweet darkness enveloped him in its embrace. I don't want to be mad at him, Ellen, but I can't help it. Finn did nothing to deserve this. He's a good boy, Steve said, his fingers picking at the blood stains on his jeans. The hospital had given him a gray shirt, and he was more than thankful for it. It had been more than an hour and a half now that they'd waited. So this surgery should fix his arm, right? Fiona asked softly. There's a chance it won't work. There was a lot of damage, and they said that the nerves in his arm had been severed. They have to fix that, then fix the muscle, and finally set the bone with pins. All of that and it still might not work. Why might it not work? If they do it right, it should work, the blonde teen said quickly, though her father only shook his head. Fiona, sweetie, Ellen said softly, it's not that easy. Nerves are delicate things. If they can't get them to work, then his hand won't ever work again. It's like putting dead batteries in a remote. Even though everything's where it should be, there's no spark, no electrical signals that's connecting the nerves. They could be too damaged, or he could get an infection. It's really risky, and we might not get the outcome we want. We have to be prepared for that, Fiona. But that's not fair. Fiona, life is not fair. It isn't easy either. Sometimes we have difficult choices that we have to make, and sometimes they're made for us, and there's nothing that can be done about it. I'm sorry, I wish I could tell you something different, but that's not how it is, Steve said softly. Oh, it's Steve. Never mind. Just pretend I read that in Steve's voice. The time passed slowly, and by the time the surgery was finished, Fiona was asleep against her mother, and it was the early hours of the morning. The doctor walked out, and Steve stood to meet him. The surgery went well. All of the connective tissue was able to be reconnected. However, we'll have no idea what condition the nerves are in until your son is awake and coherent and tests can be performed. If he has no sensation at all, we may have to amputate. If he's lucky, what we're hoping for is for him to feel a tingling sensation, like his forearm is asleep. That will mean that the surgery was a complete success, and he'll make enough of a recovery where physical therapy will be useful. I'm hoping it goes this way for him, but he's still young enough to adjust to a life with a prosthesis, if it has to come to that. Okay, thank you very much. Is he in recovery? Yes, only one at a time for now, the doctor said, looking at Fiona and Ellen, who slept against each other. I'll follow you then, Steve said, looking back at his wife and daughter before following the doctor into the recovery ward. He'll be a bit drowsy from the anesthesia, and he'll need some time to wake up completely. He'll be moved to his permanent room within the hour. We'll come get you then. Okay, thank you, Steve said quietly as they walked into a room filled with beds, patients, and monitors. It was easy to find his son. He was the third bed in, and walking over, he found his forearm bandaged up with white gauze. Walking up, he pushed his hair from his eyes, watching his slowly heavy blue eyes met his own. Hey, Dad. Hey, Finn. How you feeling? He asked quietly. Throat hurts and thirsty, Finn said, sounding more than exhausted. Well, I don't know if you can have anything to drink yet, he said softly, watching as Finn nodded. I'm tired. You can sleep, okay? And when you wake up, you'll have your own room and everyone can come visit you, okay? Okay, the blonde said, closing his eyes. All right, go to sleep. Leaning over, he kissed his son's forehead. That's from your mom. Hmm. Taking a moment to just sit with him, Steve sat on the small chair just thinking to himself about his son until one of the nurses asked him to leave. Standing, he walked out of the recovery room and entered the waiting room to find Ellen awake, her eyes on the door he'd just come out of. He's okay? He'll live. In what condition has yet to be determined. They have to wait until he's responsive and coherent to test him. If he shows no response, the doctor said that they might have to amputate. So right now it's a waiting game? Ellen asked, being sure not to wake Fiona. Unfortunately, yes. They said he'll be moved to his room within the hour. that they'll come get us when they move him. Okay. Okay, well, this, yep, this was, something. I mean, this whole book is something. Like, this book is intense, that's the entire point. Um, it reminds me of, I know this isn't nearly as bad, but it reminds me of, when I went to the hospital after breaking my arm, and that was like almost a year ago, coming up on a year ago. It'll be a year ago in like 2 weeks. I broke my arm September 11th, I think. Anyway, I remember like breaking my arm. I was on the ground screaming and crying. They rushed me to the hospital and that was and that was like a year ago, and I finished physical therapy a few weeks ago, and I forgot to tell you guys, or maybe I did tell you guys in another video and I just don't remember it, but I did complete physical therapy a few weeks ago, and I forgot to mention it to you guys, but I definitely completed it, and now me and my mom are just she's planning to take me out for dinner for food to celebrate, and we discussed because I wanted to go to my favorite wing place, so we're gonna be doing that. But it's really awesome, and I have to make I have to tell you guys the entire broken arm story now that I'm finished with physiotherapy. I was gonna do it earlier. Actually, maybe I'll do it on September 11th on the anniversary of my broken arm, my arm anniversary. That'll be perfect. But they like I actually dislocated this my elbow from its socket, and then so they had to set it. They brought me in. They had to pop it. They had to put me under anesthesia. They had to pop it back in, and then they had to set my arm because it was also broken and dislocated as well. And so they had to set it with a metal plate. So I had to get another surgery done for that. And they set my arm with a metal plate, and then I got like, and then I was in a cast for a while, and then I was in a splint, and then I was doing physical therapy, and it was really tiring, but I got it done, and I think yeah, I finished it before my birthday. Wait, was it before my birthday? It was before my birthday. I'm gonna ask my mom, but my alarm's gonna go off in a minute or two for my pills, so I'm gonna take my pills and then I'm gonna come right back with another chapter. And we will read another chapter and we'll discuss and stuff. I wonder if that answered any review. You answered a bunch of reviews. So yeah, please don't hate me for that. I follow canon? What? Wait. Well, shit. Okay. Um, I should not have read that. Now, okay, I'm gonna go. I'll be right back with another chapter. Okay, well, so I know I know the author said he follows canon, but I know there's no gang violence in the show because it's a show for kids. So I'm not really sure what that means. I'm not really sure what he means when he said he follow he follows canon. But that's probably it's probably a good thing. Because that's probably a good thing because I don't want to know. I want it to be a surprise. Hmm. And then there's like 50 um 50 responses to reviews for people, but I'm not gonna bother with all of that. I'm gonna go we're gonna move on to chapter 64. Alright. Chapter 64, Tough Decisions. It felt like the longest week ever. Ember had come to the hospital and hadn't left Finn's side at all. The longest had been to take showers, and moments after getting dressed she was right by his side, and for that Finn was grateful. When it was about time for his doctor to show up, he'd been timing it lately. He sent Ember to the cafeteria claiming that he'd been severely craving some chocolate fudge cake. That sounds good. Quickly she hurried from the room to fulfill his request. Minutes later his parents walked in, and another few minutes after, his doctor entered. He knew it was a lost cause. He knew it was a lost cause. They told him that it might take a few days to redevelop slight feeling in his arm, but it felt lifeless and dead, and it felt that way since the attack. They poked it, prodded it, and it had gotten to the point where he just stopped listening to the doctors when they spoke. Today, finally, he said the words his family was afraid to say and hear. Just cut it off. It's pointless to save an arm that doesn't work. He snapped at the doctor. That is an option, but I want to try all other options before resorting to that. I knew from the moment that saw went through my arm that it was gone. I couldn't feel a thing in that part of my arm since. It's been a week. Just accept the inevitable. I have. Finn, don't talk like that, Ellen said, but Finn cut her off. Ma, no, just stop it. It's not going to work. My arm is not going to get better, so just stop it, please, he said in a pleading voice. Finn, I can't, okay? I just can't. I don't want to keep going through this disappointment. I'm okay with it. I really, really am. It's what I want. Just don't let Ember know that. She's still holding out hope that everything will be okay. And I can't tell her that it won't. I just can't, he said quietly. Well, let me at least do one more test before we decide that this is the best course of action, the doctor said as he began poking and prodding Finn's hand and forearm, the blonde letting him. Even though it was his own arm that the doctor was poking, he might as well have just been poking his mother's or his father's for all he felt. Nothing? The doctor asked, watching as Finn shook his head. Nothing at all. Okay, we'll schedule the amputation for either this afternoon or tomorrow morning. I need to get the team together, he said, making a note in the folder at the foot of the bed before walking from the room. Ember entered a moment after with a piece of cake. What did the doctor say? Good news? She asked, setting up his food tray and placing the cake on it, Finn avoiding her gaze the entire time. What's wrong, Finn? The redhead asked, tilting her head to look at him. They're scheduling the surgery to amputate his forearm, Ellen said softly, watching as Ember looked back and forth between Finn and his mother. What? But they can't. You could get better. Ellen, you can't let them. Ember, I can't feel anything. They said that in 4 days or less I should be feeling tingling in my arm. It's been a full week. I still don't feel anything. I can't move it. I don't think it's coming back, the blonde said softly as he sighed. That's because you aren't hoping hard enough for it to work. And look at me, Finn said, catching her attention, watching with a stab of guilt as she jumped. I cannot sit here and wait when I know this isn't going to work. I can't do it at all. I'm sorry. I'm not just going to sit here and feel bad for myself. I can make this work. You know I can. Is that really what you want to, Finn? She asked softly, wiping her eyes. It's not what I want to do, it's what I have to do. But it's what I have to do. Fine then. Ember, it really will be okay. I know it'll be okay because you don't know any other way to be. That's why I worry about you. I know, it'll be alright, I promise, he said, taking her hand with his left one and squeezing it tight. It had been a long day at school, and as Fiona walked out of the college, she spotted Marshall's car waiting for her across the street. Hurrying up, she crossed the street, climbing in the car, and after tossing her bag in the back, Fiona leaned over, giving Marshall a kiss. Hey, your mom asked if I could grab you today, Marshall said quietly. She and Dad are with Finn then. Something must have happened, she said softly, kicking her foot up on the dashboard and retying her shoelace. They scheduled the amputation for 3 o'clock. What? I already talked to Finn and your parents. He said he doesn't want Ember there, and he doesn't want anyone but his parents, not even Jake. Speaking of Jake, did he show up today? Fiona asked, glancing out at the passing scenery. Not that I could tell. I can't believe he hasn't come to see him at least once. That's his brother, Marsh. I know, and I know it upsets you too. It does. Like, seriously, what's Jake's problem? I mean, I know my parents talk to him and junk, but with the stuff, I don't, I don't get it. Fee, I can't answer that. I don't know why he hasn't gone to see Finn. Only he could know the answer to that. But it's just not right, you know? I mean, I'm just upset about everything. I'm upset that Finn got so hurt. I'm upset that he doesn't want to be up there. I'm upset that Jake won't go see him. There won't ever be a time where I'm not upset right now. It's like a huge divide is happening in my family, and I don't like it at all. Marshall sat listening to her vent until he decided that the decision he was making in his mind would be a good idea. Would be a good idea. Fiona, let's go somewhere, Marshall said once she had grown silent. Huh? After we visit Finn, I want to go somewhere and get your mind off of everything. That'll be pretty tough to do, Marsh. I know, but you just need some time to relax. I know nothing will completely distract you, but I do want to put your mind at ease for a little bit. We all know that Finn's going to be okay. I mean, it's a secondary surgery. The danger risk is so much less than the first one was. And Jake? He's got two little girls, Fee. He can't bring them to the hospital, and he can't leave them with Lady either, especially since they might just be expecting again. You heard that conversation between your parents a few weeks ago, right? You just need some time to breathe. So much life is happening, and all of it is out of your control. And at times like this, you just have to roll with the punches, just like how I do. Okay, so where are we gonna go? I have a plan, and it involves stuff, Marshall said as they continued to drive to the hospital. The atmosphere in the room was a somber one. Fiona hugged her brother, and after a quick kiss, Ember and Fiona walked from the room. Marshall made to follow them, but he was called back by Finn. They were the only two left in the room. What's up? Marshall asked, standing by the bed. To him, this was a bit unusual. He and Finn weren't exactly buddy-buddy. They were friends, sure, but he was just Fiona's older brother. Marshall never expected to be the guy Finn asked to talk to before some kind of major surgery. I know that I told them I wasn't worried, but I'm scared to death, Marshall, Finn said quietly. It really will be okay, Finn. I mean, you're a tough guy. It'll be fine. It'll be hard, but you'll make it, Marshall said, running his hand through his hair, not knowing what else to say to the blonde. I don't like this. It sucks, and I'm just paranoid as hell. I mean, I know this isn't anything close to what you've been through, but no, it is different, but the fear is the same. Nobody wants to die. Marshall asked as Finn sighed looking. Marshall watched as Finn sighed looking away. I thought I did. For the longest time before Mom and Dad, before even Jake, I thought that I did want to die, but now it's like you realized every single solitary thing that you possibly had the chance of losing all at once. Yeah, and you felt the need to cling to those things because you realized how badly you needed them. Yeah. Is it wrong that I'm not mad at Jake for this happening? I mean, I know it's because of people trying to get him, but I don't think it's his fault. Nah, I don't think it's wrong, but maybe you should tell him that. Obviously, he feels like it might be his fault if he hasn't come down. Maybe he's ashamed to see you. Maybe. I want to talk to him before the surgery. Okay, Marshall said as he walked over, grabbing the phone on Finn's right-hand side and putting it on the food tray next to a slice of untouched chocolate cake. Do you want me to leave? Please. Okay, I'll take Fiona out. I know Ember took FP's truck, so she'll have her own ride. He watched as Finn nodded his head as he dialed the number on the phone, and the moment he brought the receiver to his ear, they could both hear ringing in the hall. Marshall faced the door, Finn doing the same, watching as it opened. Jake walking in. Finn, we have to talk. You think? I'll see you later, Finn. It'll be okay, Marshall said with a nod as he walked from the room, leaving the two brothers alone. Fiona gazed out the window at the passing scenery, watching as Marshall turned, pulling up at what seemed to be a farm. Step one of my fantastic plan is strawberries because I'm hungry, he said, pulling his hood up and stepping out of the car, Fiona following after him. Are we really going to pick our own strawberries, Marsh? She asked. It's not that the idea wasn't a good one, but she never imagined it would be something Marshall would take her to do. Absolutely we are. They're like 10 times better this way. Besides, this is just a snack stop. he said, grabbing a bucket and handing one to Fiona, who accepted it with a smirk. Okay, we'll pick strawberries, you super manly thing, Fiona said with a laugh as they walked into the field. Together, they walked around the field, finding the scattered strawberries and pulling them free from the bushes and tossing them in the basket. And passing a scarecrow, Marshall snatched the brimmed hat off of it and put it on, the sight making Fiona laugh hard. Oh my God, Marshall, you look like such a goof. See, the difference between me and the scarecrow is that I make this hat look good, he said with a grin before continuing to pick strawberries with Fiona, who just shook her head, grinning at him. The time passed slowly to Fiona, who scrutinized every berry before picking one. Marshall, though, seemed to be gifted in the task of picking the perfect berries of all of the time. They seemed to have dozens of strawberries, and by the time they were done, it was past sunset and dark enough for Marshall to take his hood off and return the hat to the scarecrow. I can't believe you wore that thing the whole time, Fiona said with a grin as they paid for the strawberries they picked. The scarecrow didn't mind, Marshall said, smiling at her as she followed him back to the car. So what's step 2, since snack time only took 2 hours? Step 2 is the preparation part. Now we actually make the snack, and since we're closest to your place, I'll continue the plan from there, naturally. Okay, then, will we at least need anything for your snack, Marsh? Yeah, do you have cream cheese? I know your mom has powdered sugar. No, you go start your prep when we get back to my parents' house, and I'll go get the cream cheese, okay? That sounds perfect, Marshall said, pulling into the driveway almost a half hour later and taking the keys the blonde offered. Marshall watched as she drove away before entering the house. His plan was simple. He'd make these little treats for Fiona. She'd be beyond excited to eat them, because they were deliciously addicting treats from Glob, and thus he'd be the best boyfriend ever for distracting her from her brother's major surgery, and they could go visit him tonight once her parents called them. But like many things lately, it was not what happened. The moment he opened the door, Marshall felt something was severely off in the house. He looked around before moving from the hall. The only two things he was sure of was the fact that he was glad that he'd sent Fiona to get ingredients, and that he was beyond glad that he had chemo in the next 2 days, because the last thing he needed was to be weakened by medicine that was trying to save him from himself if he had to fight a burglar or something. Scanning the rooms, Marshall made his way down the hall, his senses on hyper alert. Someone or something was here, he just knew it. It was then he could hear the footsteps on the floor above, the sound of creaking floorboards. Quietly he headed towards the stairs, ascending them carefully, placing his feet down to avoid making the wood groan underneath him. The higher he climbed, the more little noises he could hear, and spotting movement in the room down the hall, Marshall felt both a chill and a white-hot rage. Whoever was here was in Fiona's room. So where have you been? Finn asked, staring at his brother. I was ashamed to be here. Everything that happened was because of me. I know it was, Finn. So what are you going to do about it? The blonde asked, watching as Jake stood quietly. He knew that there would be retaliation of some kind for this. Finn, it has to be taken care of, he said softly, and immediately Finn sighed in annoyance. You have children, Jake. Just back the hell down, and you know I can't. Not now. Not after this, Jake snapped as Finn glared at him. Jake, it's not your choice. It is, Finn. That was a threat aimed at me. They use you to get to me, and they have to pay for that. When will you get it? Life is not a game. It's not a game of you hurt me, I hurt you. You only get one life, Jake, and I actually want to live mine, Finn shouted, feeling beyond frustrated. It's not a game. It's not. These people want to kill you. They want to scare you and get you to run away, and maybe for Lady, Charlie, and JJ, you should. Maybe you should just back down. After what they did to you, I can't. Yes, you can. You just won't. Of course I won't. You're my brother. And those are your children. Those are my nieces. Do you really want to endanger them to get back at people who didn't kill me, Jake? What if this happened to Jackie? What if they hurt Jackie or Charlie because you retaliate? You have to stop. You have to promise me you'll stop. Finn, I can't do that. You already broke your promise, so promise me this to make up for it. Finn snapped, watching as confusion came across Jake's face. What are you talking about? I know that sport you did is dead, Jake. I already know, and this is the result of that. You broke your promise, Finn shouted, watching as the look on Jake's face changed to shock. Finn, No, you promised. What's the point of promising something if you don't keep it, huh? What's the point? Finn screamed. Never had he felt like such a child, but he was mad and frustrated and scared, and all he wanted to do was make his brother see sense. You're supposed to keep it. You're not supposed to break a promise, because then what's left? A whole bunch of crap that means nothing to no one except those you want to get rid of. I mean, og! Jake, you have to face the damn reality, okay? You can't keep doing this. You need to give it up. Just like how I need my flippin' arm cut off. It's a tough choice, but it has to happen. It's dead weight. It's useless. It was good before, but now it does nothing for you, and there is no fixing it. Finn, shut up and listen to me. If you don't stop this, I swear to Glob, you won't be my brother anymore. Immediately silence rang throughout the room, deafening them both. What? Jake asked breathlessly, all fright from him now gone, as he looked at the seriousness in Finn's face. You heard me. I'll never speak to you again, Jake. I'll never talk to you or hang out with you or goof off with you anymore or anything ever again. Never, and I'm serious. If that's what it takes to make you stop, to make you choose me as your brother or revenge, then I'll do it. I'll make you pick one or the other. Don't for a second think that I won't make you choose, because I will. You know I will. Jake stood there in the silence, feeling only frustration, until finally he took a breath in and sighed. Okay, okay, I won't do it. I promise on the girls that I won't. Good, Finn said tiredly. I was waiting for you for a while, he said as his brother finally took a seat near him. I know, I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Eat that cake instead, Finn said, pushing the slice of chocolate cake towards him. You don't want it? My doctor said not to eat since I'm going in at 3. I'm not allowed to drink anything either. Something about aspirating and a whole bunch of hospital jargon, meaning I can choke on my puke and die, Finn said flatly, watching as his brother slowly grabbed the plate. That's not terrifying at all, Jake said, watching his brother's face. Not in the slightest, the blonde said as he looked away from his brother and out the window. Together they both sat in silence before Jake spoke again. Finn, I'm sorry. Blonde didn't move his gaze from the window. What for? For this, all of this. It's not fair and it's not right. This never should have happened to you. It should be me in that bed, he said, his voice sounding defeated. Silence permeated the room once again, but now Finn looked towards his brother. Have you ever thought that this happened for a reason? That it was me instead of you for a reason, Jake? If it was you at the job site, chances are that you'd be dead, not have a messed up arm. Stop lingering. I accept your apology, and I know you'd give anything to make this different. But you can't, Jake. I'm okay with that, though, Finn said just as the nurses entered the room. I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have to take you down to pre-op. That's fine. We just finished talking anyways, Finn said, smiling at the nurse. Jake watched as they began moving the bed towards the pre-op room, Finn chatting away with the nurse to his right who smiled and laughed at his words. I'm only doing this as a weight loss procedure, you see, but I'm hoping that I could get a robot arm or something. But wouldn't the metal be heavier than your arm? It would defeat the purpose, the nurse said, laughing. The rest of their words were lost to Jake as they made their way through the double doors for hospital staff only. Taking a breath and sighing, Jake walked down the hall. He had a lot to think about. Okay. Sheesh. Well, I was hoping that that wouldn't happen the way it did, but it did, and I don't know who's in Fiona's room, but now I'm worried. And I will be right back with another chapter. And I'm back with another chapter, and I don't really have much to say. It's midnight. So, uh, let's just, let's just get right into this. Chapter 65, For Love. Marshall listened to the sound of opening and closing drawers and heavy footsteps moving around in the blonde's room, though there were no sounds to identify exactly who this person was. Moving quietly, he kicked the door, opening it. Startling the occupant inside, Marshall listened to the piercing shriek before being pelted in the face with a book, groaning loudly. What the hell did you do that for? You scared me to death, a familiar voice shouted. What the hell were you doing in here when nobody was home, Marcy? Marshall asked, rubbing his face as he bent to pick up the book. Quickly, Marceline grabbed the book with her face tinted red. The last time me and Fiona had a jam session, she grabbed my songbook by mistake. They have the same design on the front, and I have a lot of personal stuff in it. When I realized that I had Fiona's, I knew I had to get mine back. Besides, it's not like I don't know where the hidey key is, Marshall. Wait, so that song Prove You Wrong wasn't Fiona's? Marshall asked, watching as she groaned loudly in embarrassment. Oh my glob, you read my song? The raven-haired girl said, holding the book tightly to her chest. I thought it was Fiona's. You can't blame me for that, Marshall asked, watching as the pinkish tint of her face turned dark red. Oh wait, I, I thought it was Fiona's. You can't blame me for that, Marshall said, listening as she groaned loudly in embarrassment. I know, but still, oh glob. But it was really good from what there was in the book. Was it about an ex or someone that you like? Marshall, she said, giving him a warning look, but he refused to be hushed. No, tell me. I mean, I get that it's deep and personal, but it's like you were trying to get through to someone, and I want to help if I can. Marsh, it's none of your business, okay? Marceline said softly with a sad look in her eyes. Okay, he said quietly. If it makes you feel better, Fiona hasn't been in it or near it since she put it down. Good, just don't tell her, okay? Her voice pleading. Okay, I won't tell Fiona. Marshall watched Marshall watched as she nodded. How's Finn? Is his arm any better? No, he's in surgery now to Marshall said, leaving the rest of the sentence trailing off, watching as her face grew pale and understanding. I see. I'll be in to visit him tomorrow. Okay. Marceline quickly passed Marshall, making her way out of the room. Wait, Marshall asked, grabbing her arm, watching as she turned her head to acknowledge him and show she was listening. Was that song about Finn? No, it wasn't. With that, Marceline hurried down the stairs and out the door with her book in hand. By the time Fiona returned to the house, Marceline was long gone, and Marshall had finished prepping all of the strawberries, cutting the tops off of them, and cleaning up the mess from doing so. Together, Marshall and Fiona made his special treat, which turned out to be some kind of strawberry cream cheese concoction that tasted very much like cheesecake. In the time it took for Fiona to run upstairs and drop off her backpack, Marshall had mixed the filling and was piping it into the strawberries. Handing her one with a smug grin, Marshall watched as Fiona sighed. These taste awesome, Marsh. Of course they do. I can barely make real food, but snacks and desserts I can pull off like a pro. You make awesome spaghetti. And that's all I make that tastes awesome, he said, laughing, watching as she smiled softly. So what else are you gonna do to distract me? Fiona asked, watching as Marshall continued to fill the strawberries. Well, I figured we could watch a movie, something that's probably going to make you happy, like a Disney movie or something like that, he said as he shrugged his shoulders and watching as the blonde nodded. Okay, I can finish the strawberries if you want to pick out a movie, Fiona suggested, watching as Marshall offered her the piping bag before walking from the room. Slowly, Fiona worked, trying to keep the pressure even on the bag. It was tougher than she thought. Too much pressure, and the filling came out too fast. Too little, and it barely moved. By the time Marshall was back, Fiona was only on her third strawberry. Smiling, he put his arms around hers and covered her hands with his. Like the like this, see? He asked, putting slight pressure on the bag, as Fiona concentrated diligently, nodding her head as she did so, keeping the pressure even, as he moved her arms, making little swirls on top of the fruit. Ooh, this one's pretty, she said with a small smile. Of course it is, you made it, Marshall said, leaning his head on her shoulder and kissing her cheek. After 15 more minutes of filling strawberries, Marshall putting them in the fridge, they made their way into the family room for the movie. He'd chosen Up. Marshall had seen the beginning of Up. When they'd had the Disney movie marathon at his place, he'd gone to get drinks and make popcorn and tons of snacks, and had intentionally missed the first 10 or so minutes of the movie. Now he sat there with an inconsolable Fiona in his arms, knowing that this was exactly what she needed. At first his plan had been to distract her from what was going on, but realizing that it was only making the blonde worse, Marshall changed tactics. Sometimes you needed to face the problems around you, pretending they didn't exist or trying to push them away didn't, and wouldn't make them magically vanish. Marshall could tell that the first few minutes of her crying had been for the movie because he couldn't deny it. It was tear-worthy, and anyone who didn't agree was a liar. But the tears following had been her holding back her emotions again. He knew she was worried about Finn. He knew she was worried about the band and FP and always him being sick. After only moments of her tears, he pulled the blonde into his lap, feeling as she buried her face into the crook of his neck and cried. He knew there wasn't much he could do. Fiona was tough, but things out of her control were always what took the biggest toll on her. Fiona, being Fiona, would never admit when she was upset, and ended up bottling her emotions like she always did. He knew the explosion was inevitable, and he decided that the best thing to happen was to make her cry. Words didn't cover how she felt. Her boyfriend was in major surgery, and there was nothing she could do about it. With a sigh, Ember sat alone in her apartment. It sounded so weird to call it that. Her apartment. It used to be their apartment. The redhead missed her big brother. Almost always at a time like this, he would pop up with some way of making her feel better. Almost as if on cue, her phone began ringing. Finding it, she answered it quickly. It was her job. Hello? Mrs. Flint, why aren't you on the flight to New York? It was the cool, clipped voice of her boss's receptionist. I already told you guys, I can't. My boyfriend's having major surgery. I can't go. I need to be here, Ember said firmly. She could hear the receptionist speaking to someone in the background and recognized the voice of her boss. Moments later, he was on the line. Ember, we need you at that shoot. Either you're on the next flight at 7 p.m., or we'll find somebody else to take your place in our lineup. So either I make it to the airport or I'm fired? She asked simply, feeling as if a chunk of ice had settled in her stomach. Somebody's getting it. We'll be sending the driver for your arrival at 9 p.m., he said in a smug voice that had thoroughly pissed her off. Actually, you won't be seeing me at 9 o'clock or any time after. If those are my only two options, then fire me because I'm not leaving, she said softly, hearing silence on the other line. Very well, from this moment you're no longer employed with this company. Don't expect a good reference from us either. Please, this was just something to pass the time with, she said, hanging up the phone and sighing in annoyance. It was like the cherry on the bad day Sunday. She needed a distraction, yet she wanted to be alone, though she didn't at the same time. More specifically, she wanted the company of one person in particular, and they weren't there to give it to her. Iggy had been off the radar for weeks. The last she'd heard, he'd kicked Angel out of the apartment once her school year started up again. A school year starting in August should be criminal. That thought, though, made her laugh before she sighed once again. Going to the bookshelf, she grabbed her laptop and began job searching. Hopefully, that would take her mind off the situation at hand. He'd been notably silent. Everyone at some point had tried contacting him. Marshall, Fiona, Ember, Moko, Ash, even Billy, but Ignitus ignored them all. Even now his cell phone was buzzing, and closing his eyes he ignored it, feeling the sharp but manageable stabbing pains in his stomach. He'd need another pill in the next hour or so. Sometimes he just wanted to be alone, and that's what he wanted right now. After kicking out Angel, keeping her only for her remaining summer months like he said he would, he booted her out the moment her school opened. It was cold-hearted, and he didn't care. She brought out the worst in him, and introduced him to possibly the worst habits he could ever pick up. His grandmother would be absolutely ashamed of him. Those drugs she introduced him to had been intense and amazing, and terribly addictive. They made him into a monster. They brought it, they brought out all of his anger and frustration, and made him an absolutely horrible person, with a volatile temper and a penchant for breaking things. He knew all of this, yet he still continued with the drugs for the one reason that the withdrawals were far more painful than the feelings of regret and anger that he felt when taking the drugs. Ignitus felt like a loser, so he did the only thing he could think of, and that was to move to a new apartment where no one could find him and try to block everything out. All he wanted was to be alone, just exist and be. At this point, he wanted to be alone, but he also wanted company. But she couldn't see him like this. Not her. Anyone else could see him like this, but her. Even his sister, though she would probably kill him if he didn't kill himself with these damn pills. Ignitus just wanted everything to go back to the way it was. He wanted to not have such conflicting emotions about those two, about Fiona and Marceline. Fiona was beautiful and stole his heart with one glance, but she was with Marshall, and Ignitus didn't see that changing. He doubted it ever would. Marceline, though, she was more than that, and the way he was now, he was right. He could only ruin her, if not with drugs, then with something else. He refused to allow that. Ignitus knew he needed help, but it was also something he wanted to get out of himself. He could do it. He knew he could do it. If he could just get to a point where he could control it, then he knew that he'd be okay. All he had to do was sort out the pills and try to keep the dosage the same every time. Maybe then it would be enough. Enough to function in society without being found out. Enough to not feel absolutely strung out. Enough for his body to take and manage without causing the pains of withdrawals. If it came to it, he could always go up a gram or two until he felt normal again. All he wanted was to be normal again, to feel normal again. Methadone was a hell of a drug. Hearing the phone continue to buzz, Ignitus stood from the bed in the corner of the flat and walked over to the small counter. Seeing his sister's name on the caller ID, he answered the phone for the first time in weeks. Hey, Emma. Iggy, can you come over, please? She asked in a tight voice. Amber, what's wrong? He asked. I just want my brother. Okay, you still have my truck. Do you want to meet me up at the park off Bailey? Yeah. Okay, I'll be there in 5, he said, listening as his sister hung up first. Grabbing his sweatshirt, Ignitus walked from the apartment. The pills were the furthest thing from his mind. The walk was short, and he'd been waiting on the swings for nearly 10 minutes before he watched the familiar form of his twin sister enter the park. The swings had always been their thing. As kids, it was a race to the swing. As teenagers, it was meet up at the swings and head home together so their parents wouldn't know that they'd been out doing their own thing. And now, as adults, it was just ingrained as the place to meet up. Standing, he walked towards her, and before she could even ask what was wrong, the moment she was within arm's reach, Ember threw her arms around him and burst into tears. Ignitus stood startled. Ember didn't cry. She could fake tears in an instant, but these were real. Slowly, he wrapped his arms around her, standing as she balled into his sweatshirt, talking incoherently, sounding utterly heartbroken. Because he couldn't understand, Ignitus's only thought was that Finn must have broken up with her. Instead of outright finding him and beating him to a pulp, Ignitus decided to ask first, because if he was wrong, chances were that Ember would kill him. Did that blonde loser break up with you? He asked, feeling slightly relieved as she shook her head no. That was good. It was one less ass to have to kick. Okay, you have to try and calm down so that I can understand you, okay? Finn's in the hospital, she said in a soft, watery voice. A group of people attacked him at the construction site, and he almost died. He's in surgery right now because they're amputating his arm, she said, dissolving into tears once again. I'm sorry, Em. I'm sorry Finn got hurt, Ignitus said as he continued rubbing her back soothingly. My job fired me today, too, Ember said softly, sniffling her nose. Today's just the worst day ever. Ignitus simply continued to hold her as his sister squeezed him tighter. It'll be okay, Emma. Bottle people are dicks. Besides, I'm sure that boss of yours was a vampire anyways. I could see it all over him. All he wanted to do was make you join his Legion of the Undead. Hearing this, Ember laughed through her tears. Of course he did, but I'm pretty sure most models are aliens anyways. I mean, I like to eat food, and they were surviving on Tic Tacs. That's not really my scene, so yeah, she said, earning her brother's grin. Come on, Em, let me buy you a burger. There's a pretty good diner near here, and you look malnourished anyways, he said, releasing her and grabbing his little sister around her shoulders, leading her in the direction of the restaurant. Marceline sat in her room, happy with her decision. She'd decided that the song was too personal to have in the book. The last thing she needed was for him to accidentally read it when they hung out next. Carefully, she tore out the pages, and walking over to her dresser drawer, she stuffed them in the bottom, covering them with clothes. The last thing she needed was for him to figure out how she felt, though Marceline was more than sure that Ignitus knew. Either way, the song could not be seen again, intentionally or by accidental prying eyes. It was thoughts on Finn. Tough Finn, strong Finn, awesome in a fight Finn who never backed down ever was losing his arm. Hearing the news about Finn had bummed her out. Marceline had hoped that he would have a full recovery, and knew that telling their friends was going to be difficult. With a sigh, she dialed Bonneville, knowing that this was not going to be an easy conversation, but knowing it had to be done, she listened as the phone rang before her best friend picked up. Hey, Marceline, what's up? Bonnie, I have some bad news. Alright, good stuff. Alright, we got two more chapters to go, so I'll be right back. I gotta refill my water and stuff, and so I'll be back in a few minutes with the next chapter. We still have two chapters to go, but luckily this was a pretty short one, and it looks like the next one's gonna be much of the same, so see you guys in a minute. Okay, I'm back with another chapter. Hang on. Okay, I'm back with another chapter. We're gonna get right into this. Chapter 66, Bound by Blood. It had taken 3 months for everything to go back to some semblance of normalcy. Finn moved in with Ember, and Ember cared for him in every way she was able to. She was with him through the physical therapy sessions, through his nightmares, and even when he got his prosthetic arm. Though there was one thing she found to be strange. Every time she went to go to the store to go grocery shopping, Finn seemed beyond eager to go with her, which was weird with his ever-growing independence as of late. Every time Finn would specifically ask if she needed a hand pointing to something higher up. Ember never did, though, and Finn seemed more disappointed than anything else. The redhead was starting to wonder if it wasn't just a kind gesture, and that possibly Finn was waiting for her to do something in particular. With that in mind, and knowing they needed groceries, Ember walked into the living room where Finn was trying and succeeding at playing video games with one hand. Hey, I'm gonna run to the grocery store. Wanna come with? She asked, leaning against the doorframe, her purse on her shoulder. Yeah, sure. Again, he was too eager to go to the store, but shaking her head with a smile, Ember grabbed the keys, Finn only feet behind her as she made her way to the car. She watched as he strapped on the seatbelt and looked at her with a grin. You're getting better at that, the redhead said with a smile. I know. Today's gonna be a great day, Finn said as Ember began heading towards the grocery store. What makes you say that? Just a feeling is all, Em. The grocery store was packed with people, and for a Saturday, Ember wasn't too shocked. Luckily, though, they only needed a few things, and making her way through the aisles, Ember found them fairly quickly. She walked through the baking section and suddenly spotted browning mix on the top shelf. Without thinking, Ember said the words that would set off a chain of actions like she'd never seen. Hey, Finn, could you give me a hand? She asked, calling down the aisle, watching as his head snapped towards her. Quickly, he slipped off his prosthetic arm with the fluidity that only came with lots and lots of practice, and the next thing she knew, it was flying towards her. The problem was that Finn had been too excited. He'd thrown it just a bit too hard because he watched as his flying arm smacked his girlfriend in the face as she yelped in shock. Standing there holding her face, Ember looked from her boyfriend to the prosthetic arm, lying motionless on the floor and back again. Okay, I see what. That was not how that was supposed to happen, Finn said, watching as Ember continued looking from him to his arm before bursting into fits of laughter. I asked you to give me a hand, she said, laughing so hard that tears streamed down her face. And you actually gave me your hand. Oh my god, Finn, that's ridiculous. Continuing to laugh, Ember wiped her face before stooping to grab Finn's arm and knocking the box of brownies off the shelf. It took several more minutes until she could stop laughing, and by the time she could, they were in line at the register. So, are you mad or not? Finn asked. He'd been waiting nervously for her to respond to his actions. You can do that again as long as you promise not to slap me with your hand, Finn, Ember said as their groceries were scanned. That was hilarious, though, she said as an afterthought with a shake of her head. Just don't do that to me again, she chuckled. As a matter of fact, I think I'm going to drop you off at your parents' house because I have my job interview today, and you need to stay out of trouble. Okay, I'm cool with that. Besides, I haven't seen Mom or Dad in a few weeks now. I know, so I'll drop you off now, do the interview, and come back for you and make brownies, Ember said with a smile as they headed towards Finn's parents' house. Jeez. As they drove, he She watched as Finn pulled out his phone and began texting. Awesome, Fee's home. She said Ma should be back soon and that Dad's at work today. Okay, so today it's your job to be surrounded by beautiful women, Ember said with a grin, watching as Finn smirked. My mom and sister aren't beautiful. They're cute and lovely. Now Ember smiled. Your sister's beautiful? Nope, just cute. I'll never call my sister beautiful, ever, the blonde said firmly, making Ember wonder aloud. Why not? The answer she got, though, was not the one she'd been expecting. I had a sister. She was just over a year old when they took us from our parents, I think, and I don't know what happened to her. So any girl around Fee's age could be my sister, and I'd rather not call my potential biological sister hot or beautiful or sexy or anything like that. Oh, Finn, I'm sorry. I didn't know you had a sister. That's okay. The only people who know for sure are my parents and me. Not even Jake knows. Finn, but what if she finds you? That's impossible. Why? Because when my parents found me and Jake we were on the other side of the country. My sister wouldn't be able to find me. I mean, what are the odds? Besides, I don't even remember her name. I remember vaguely what she looks like, but the fact that I can't remember her name, that's just sad. I'm sorry. For what? For bringing it up. I can see it's bummed you out. Turning, she pulled into the driveway, and together they spotted Fiona sitting on the steps. You know, Finn, Fiona looks an awful lot like you, Ember said, watching as Finn looked at the blonde, who was now waving at them back to her before shaking his head. Leaning over, he gave her a kiss on the cheek. Ember, the odds of that are ridiculous, Finn said, getting out of the car. You never know, Finn, she said through the window before driving off. You never know what? Fiona asked, watching as Finn walked up, approaching her. Nothing to worry about, little sis. Just some private stuff. Ew, I don't want to know now, she said, standing and following him into the house. So Ma got home just a bit before you did. She's in her office. Okay, I'll go bug her. Want to play Halo or something later? Halo, then Left 4 Dead? Fiona suggested, watching her brother smile. Sounds like a plan, Fio, Finn said with a grin as he headed towards their mother's office. Standing, he wondered how he would bring it up. How he could ask his mom that he wanted to go through his adoptive files, along with Fiona's, to see if maybe they were similarities, if maybe she was his sister, because honestly, before Ember even brought it up, he'd been wondering about it. She was just too much like him. Oh my God. um, Finn, sweetie, what's wrong? You've been standing there for a few minutes now. Hearing this, he snapped out of his reverie, and looking up, he spotted his mother standing in the doorway of her office. Oh, I wanted to talk to you about something. Okay, hon, come on in, she said, watching her son walk into the office, and shutting the door behind her. Ellen sat down. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, but I was wondering about some stuff, and I know it's private, and you'll probably say no, but I want to look at my adoption records and history. Finn, you have a right to look at those papers. They're about you. I know that, but I know it's dumb, but I want to look at Fiona's too. Now Ellen was curious. But why? Ma, she's a lot like me, don't you think? He asked, watching as Ellen narrowed her eyes in thought. You two are very similar, and I won't lie, the resemblance between you two is remarkable. Standing, she walked over to the file cabinet, and grabbing two rather thick files, Ellen sat back down with them at her desk before slowly pushing them towards her son. Staring curiously at her, Ellen spoke before Finn could ask. If Fiona's your sister, I want you to know first. With a nod, Finn pulled the files toward him, opening his first and finding the birth certificate. Finding the name of his birth mother, he felt a pang of both sadness and anger. This was the woman who gave him life and then gave him away, gave him and his sister away, and his father, the man who gave them life yet ran from his family. Melinda and Martin Mertens, he said softly, putting his birth certificate aside before opening up Fiona's file. Hers was littered with yellow copies of transfer papers. There were dozens of them, all indicating different places where she lived. Houses upon houses, group homes, a nunnery. Finally, he found it. his gaze quickly searching the paper, scanning the words before they sank in. So? Ellen asked, beyond curious. Ma, she really is. Fiona really is my sister. Standing, Ellen walked around the desk to look at the papers. The names on the certificates were identical. The signatures were almost exactly the same. While Ellen processed this information, never having really looked into Fiona's history, aside from her most recent foster families, Finn stood taking the papers and walked from the room. The first place he headed to was the blonde's room, his sister's room, his actual sister's room. It was empty. Turning, he hurried down the stairs and headed towards the family room, his ears picking up the sounds of screaming aliens and gunshots as he did so. Entering, he watched Fiona sitting on the floor, playing Halo, laughing almost maniacally as she stabbed an elite in the back with a plasma sword. Turning, she spotted him and smiled happily. I'm getting better, but are you ready to play? Her eagerness to play changed to confusion when Finn didn't move. He was just staring at her, like he'd never seen her before in his life. Finn, you're kinda creeping me out here, she said slowly. I never thought I'd see you again, he said softly. Now that he looked at her, really looked at her, the vague memories he had of his childhood became bright and vivid. She looked like their mother, the blonde hair and the dusting of freckles across her nose. Their eyes, though, they both had their father's eyes, because from what Finn could remember, their mom's eyes were brown. Finn, what are you talking about? Fiona asked nervously, contemplating whether she should call their mom downstairs to help Finn out. You're my sister, he said softly. I know, and you're my brother. Jake is too. Are we being sure we remember this? Fiona asked with a laugh, watching as now Finn shook his head. No, that's not what I mean, Fiona, look, he said, holding out the certificates for her. Read the parents' names. Giving him a curious look, Fiona glanced, searching the first paper and spotting it. Okay. Now Finn motioned for her to look at the second paper, and when she did, Fiona felt her heart pounding in her chest. The sight of those same names written on her birth certificate made everything stop. Just like that, she couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. All Fiona could do was glance from one name to the other, just to be sure they weren't copies of the same paper. They weren't. While the names were the same, the writing was just barely different, with a flourish on the A on one and the same M on both. We're related, Fiona breathed, quickly hugging her brother, who hugged her back tightly. You're my little sister. You're my actual little sister. Fiona, I really didn't think I'd ever see you again. I remember you from when you were so small, and I remember when you learned to walk, and I remember when they took us away. I'm so sorry I stopped looking for you. I'm so sorry I forgot about you. What? No, that's not your fault, Finn. It's not your fault at all. You can't help that. Mom, tell him it's okay, Fiona said, looking over and spotting their mother, who had just come down the stairs. It's not okay. I forgot about you for years. You became just a memory to me, just a passing thought now and again. I'm sorry I gave up. Finn, please, it's okay. It really is. I mean, this will sound horrible, but I don't remember any of my early childhood. I don't remember anything but that first home before the nunnery. I don't remember our parents or our home or even you, and for that, I'm sorry. At least you remembered me. I didn't even think to ask if I had any siblings, Fiona said, hugging Finn tightly. But I'm glad I looked into it. I thought that maybe you were my sister, so I finally asked Mom to look at the papers, and now I'm just so happy, he said with a laugh, rubbing his face before stepping back from Fiona. Well, nothing's really changed, right? Fiona asked with a smile. You're still my big brother, it's just on paper now. Yeah, that's all, he asked. Yeah, that's all. Want to play a game? He asked, walking to the couch. Sure. I'm gonna go bake something now, okay? Ellen asked, quickly turning and walking from the room. I think she's crying. Me too, but just leave her. She'll make something awesome and then we get goodies. Now Fiona laughed. That's mean. It's only mean if it's bad, and cookies aren't bad, the blonde said with a grin as he flopped on the couch. Brownies aren't bad either, Fiona said wistfully, and hearing this, Finn burst into laughter, earning his sister's confusion. What the heck is that about? I threw my arm at Ember today, he said between fits of laughter, watching as his sister looked at him in shock. Oh, God, Finn, why? She asked for a hand. Are you serious right now? Fiona asked, laughing. Why would I lie about throwing my arm at my girlfriend? That's like the best hook of a story to tell someone. Think of it, Fee. Yeah, so this one time I threw my arm at my girlfriend. It's all okay, see? Same arm. Hearing this, whatever self-control the blonde had was lost, as Fiona began laughing hysterically. Yep, we're definitely related. Walking over, she grabbed the controller and reset the game, so her brother could play as well. The smell of cookies and brownies wafted down towards them, and without saying a word, both knew that regardless of whether this news had been found out or not, they'd always have this bond between them. Aw. Alright. That was super cute. Like, that wasn't super intense. I mean, it was like happy stuff, but a lot of the time it's like really intense happy stuff, like the cancer's gone, or, you know, like, or like, Finn's gonna survive, or like, um, Fiona's getting adopted or stuff like that. But some actual really good fluffy stuff, and that was just kind of like lighthearted, nice times, and because the last few chapters have been pretty intense, and we got one more chapter to go, so hopefully we don't end on like a super dark cliffhanger. We're probably gonna end on a super dark cliffhanger, but I'll probably be bringing you guys the next chapter in a couple of days after this, like after the last one. So I'm gonna be right back in a second. Alright, it's the next day. I was gonna just do chapter 62, chapter 63 to 66 because it was super late and I just didn't want to record anymore and I wasn't up for it, and it was gonna take for but then it was gonna take forever to for the video to even render, and I was going to be up for at minimum like another 45 minutes to an hour, and I didn't want to do that, so I just decided, well, since I'm going to have to render it tomorrow anyway, I'm just gonna record the last chapter tomorrow. So, so I'm gonna just get right into it without further ado. Chapter 67, Memories. It was a good day, and as of late those were pretty rare. The sun was shining, the air was warm for fall, and most of all with the pills Ignitus was managing his addiction. Today, everything around him seemed to be changing. Making his way over to Marshall's place, Ignitus sighed, looking up at the sky. Everything was just peaceful and serene. Fiona, it seemed, was indeed moving in with Marshall, and it seemed to be a slow-moving process. Slowly, piece by piece, her things were being brought to his place from hers, and it seemed that it required a celebration, because Marshall decided that everyone who could needed to come hang out at his place and just have some fun. He even requested that Ignitus bring a bottle or two from work, and never having seen Fiona drunk, he'd agreed, viewing it as a rare opportunity to see something new. Fiona folded the last of her clothes, putting them into the drawer, before bumping it shut with her hip. Looking around, she smiled at the change in the house. The bed was new, a queen-sized one from a full, the dresser newer and much larger, big enough for both of their clothes. The biggest improvement, however, was the couch. Together they had gone and picked out another couch to replace the couch of pain. This one was also a red couch, much comfier, but unlike the last one, this couch pulled out into a bed just in case one of the guys needed to crash at their place. Just the thought of it made Fiona smile. It was their place, and more than anything, that was what excited her. Walking down the stairs, Fiona was grabbed around the waist and laughed, feeling as Marshall buried his face into her neck. I'm glad you decided to move in. Me too, Marsh, the blonde said, feeling the tingle of his lips against her skin, smirking as the kisses grew more insistent. Ah, not now. The guys are coming over, she said, pulling away and listening as Marshall let out an exaggerated sigh. Okay, fine, he said, releasing Fiona, who walked just far enough out of his reach before leaning against the door frame. Yeah, fine, she said with a teasing grin before leaning into his ear. We can christen the bed later. Turning, she walked from the room, trying not to laugh at the look of shock on Marshall's face. She never talked like that, and when she did, the look on his face was always worth it. In the kitchen, she prepared the chip dip her mom had taught her how to make, and topping it off with the final ingredient, she dipped a chip in it. And taking a bite, Fiona smiled, sensing Marshall behind her. So, yes, my love? So when's later? Marshall asked, watching her from the doorway, like she'd done to him only moments ago. After everyone leaves, Marshall, Fiona said with her back to him, listening as his footsteps got closer towards her, before she was lifted from the ground and placed on the counter facing him. His arms lacing their way around his waist. Smiling, Fiona placed hers around his neck. His arms lacing their way around her waist. Smiling, Fiona placed hers around his neck and smiled, leaning her forehead against his. Why can't it be now? He whined once again, kissing her neck and working his way down, his hands tracing along her visible skin, giving the blonde goosebumps. Because people are coming now. They're not here yet, plus we can be quick, he said with a grin, feeling Fiona start to give in and return his advances. Slowly her fingers traced through his hair as she kissed him back, feeling as his fingers worked along the waistband of her jeans. Just as he'd unbuttoned them, pulling the zipper down, a loud knock came at the door, and in unison Marshall sighed in annoyance as Fiona laughed. Taking his face between her hands, Fiona kissed Marshall passionately with a smile on her lips before resting her forehead against his, the sound of knocking meeting their ears once again. Told you they'd be here soon, Fiona said, kissing him once again before hopping off the counter and fixing her jeans as she walked from the kitchen, leaving Marshall scowling in annoyance in the kitchen. Um, With when Fiona returned, behind her was Ignitus and Ash, both who were holding party supplies in their hands. Ignitus had several bottles and bags on his arms, while Ash was holding bags full of snacks, and walking over, he dumped the bag on the table, Fiona walking over to help him, leaving Ignitus alone with Marshall. Dude, you look pissed, the redhead said with a growing smirk. Did we, dare I say, interrupt anything? He asked, earning Marshall's punch. Now Ignitus laughed. He'd recognized that look of annoyance on Marshall's face any day. He and Ash had definitely interrupted something, and the fact that he could piss Marshall off about it would probably be the highlight of his day. So we did. Nice to know what you'll be thinking about all night, Marsh, the redhead said as he ducked the next swing, putting Marshall into a headlock after catching him off guard. You suck, I give. Knew you would. With a laugh, he released his dark-haired friend and walked over to the couch, dropping on it and blinking in shock. It was what felt like the softest thing in the world. It was amazing. He had never felt anything like this in this house ever in all of his days. Quickly, he leapt to his feet and walked into the kitchen, grabbing Ash and whipping him from the conversation he was having with Fiona, much to the blonde's shock. Dude, what the hell are you doing? Sit now, he said, pushing him into the chair, watching as Ash winced, ready for the hard, painful cushions of the old couch, only to be pleasantly surprised. They were soft and comfortable and shockingly relaxing, the complete opposite of the old couch of pain. Dude, I know. What? Right? Think they're excited, Marsh? Fiona asked with a smirk. A little bit, he said, grinning. All right, the pleasantries our butts have made aside, I'm gonna start making drinks, Ignitus said as he walked from the room, Fiona following him. What are you making? The blonde asked, watching as he began pulling bottles of juice and alcohol from the bags. Girlie, to celebrate your newly found independence and freedom into adulthood, I'm gonna make you a magical mix of concoctions that'll blow your mind. And because you're a girl, naturally you need tons of crushed ice to make it a slurpy type of drink. Hearing this, though, amused, Fiona was slightly insulted. Screw you! I don't need crushed ice. Trust me, you'll need it, he said, laughing as he began mixing the combination together in a glass. Bite me, Iggy, now make me a drink. Fiona watched as he dropped several ice cubes and handed her the glass. Drink done. Enjoy it, he said, pouring himself a shot of whiskey, and with ease he swallowed it after tapping the shot glass against Fiona's cup. Taking a drink, Fiona smiled. It's really good. Of course it is. I made it. Now have you ever done shots? No? Well, Marshall's probably your best bet for teacher because everything light enough for you is like water to me, so yeah. So teach me to drink shots then, Fiona said, taking another sip of her drink. It's not like you can't drink yours and I can't drink mine. You're asking to get drunk, Fiona. Yes, I am. I want us all to get drunk and have fun, and I want to bake cookies before we get drunk so I can have a snack. All right, girlie, you make cookies. Shots class can be postponed. Ignita said with a smirk, watching as she grabbed the cookie dough from the fridge. The group laughed as Marshall and Ignitus finished telling of one of their exploits in freshman year. Wiping his eyes, Mo took a drink, then spoke. Hey, remember when Marshall let science out? Dude, for the last time, I didn't let out science, Marshall said in exasperation. Yeah, I do. We had detention for a week, Ash said, laughing, though to their surprise, Fiona spoke up. Marshall didn't let out science. I did. What? You gonna tell them why? Marshall asked, smoking, watching as Fiona blushed in embarrassment. No, I'll tell them. No, I'll tell them, he said, watching as the blonde scowled. Don't you dare! See, she wanted science to. Almost immediately, Fiona leapt on her boyfriend, covering his mouth with her hands and cringing as he licked her. Ugh, Marshall, fine, I'll tell. I wanted to see if science would do my homework, Fiona said, her face bright red. Wait, what? Ash, Ash asked with a laugh. What? What? Who is science? What? I'm so confused right now. Anyway, I wanted to see if science would do my homework, Fiona said, her face bright red. Wait, what? Ash asked with a laugh. You didn't. She did. The only reason that I got detention was because I helped Fiona look for her, Marshall said as he laughed, having removed the blonde's hand from his mouth. It's not that dumb of an idea. I just figured that since she's been there for years, that something stuck with her. I mean, why wouldn't it? She asked, although the answer should be more than obvious. Because she's a rat fee, geez, Ignitus said, shaking his head as he poured out a round of shots for the five of them and passing them around. I want to hear this story because I can't imagine little Miss Fiona doing anything detention worthy, he said with a laugh, earning a dirty look from Fiona. Hey, I've done tons of detention worthy stuff. I've seen you there a few times too, Ig. We just didn't know each other then, Fiona said as she shrugged, taking her shot and immediately drinking from a can of soda, feeling the burn of the liquor. I'll tell you then if you're so eager to hear the story, Fiona said, sitting back and closing her eyes. It happened during fourth period at first lunch. Flashback. Crap, 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 the blonde teen whispered as she hurried down the hallway. She was screwed, utterly screwed, and all because she looked away for the tiniest minute. Scanning the hallway, she spotted a familiar face sitting in one of the classes. It was Marshall, which was odd because normally he was skipping class to do something fun or whatever, but at the moment he looked like he was about to fall asleep. Suddenly the idea dawned on her, what if Marshall helped her look for science? That would cut the time in half to find her. Sneaking near the door out of sight of the teacher, Fiona wondered how she would get his attention. He was close enough to hear a whisper, but then so was the teacher. It seemed luck was on her side because the teacher began speaking after writing on the board. Mr. Abadir, is my lecture on modern history boring you? Oh no, sir, your lecture is riveting. I'm on the edge of my seat, Marshall said with a yawn, as he rolled his eyes, earning the laughs of his classmates. Since you look like you're about to take a nap, do us both a favor and take a walk to the restroom to wake yourself up. This information will be on your midterm. Great idea, I'm all for it, he said, standing and walking from the room. Hey, Marshall, Fiona said, falling into stride with him. Oh, hey, Fiona, what's up? Don't you usually have lunch right now? He asked as they walked down the hall. Well, yeah, but I kind of had a problem. But I kind of have a problem and was wondering if you could help me. With? He asked, cocking an eyebrow. He liked Fiona. There was something about the blonde that called to him, and he could always tell when she was having some sort of dilemma by how she beat around the bush when she spoke of the issue. He watched as she took a deep breath before blurting it out. I lost science. How do you lose a class? No, the rat. I lost science, the rat, she said, blushing out of embarrassment. How'd you do that? Did you let her out of her cage? Well, yeah, I wanted to see if she could do science homework. I mean, she's lived through the classes enough for something to have stuck, she said, watching as Marshall stopped mid-step. Wait, you lost science because you were trying to get her to do your homework? Marshall asked, giving her a weird look that immediately Fiona pouted at. Don't judge me. I'm bad at science and math, and I was getting desperate. Hearing this, he laughed. The dark-haired teen honestly couldn't help it. You could have just asked me, Fiona Glob, he said, wiping away a tear. So, will you help me find her, Marshall? Please, she pleaded. Fiona, that's a lot of work, he said with an exaggerated sigh. Please, you're like my only friend. You're the only person who I can ask for help from, she said softly. That tugged at Marshall's heart a bit. Fiona, for some strange reason, did have a tough time making friends. Okay, no need to bust out with the waterworks, Fiona. I'll help you find science, he said, and before he could even finish the sentence, the blonde was hugging him tightly. Thank you! Marshall, you're the best! Quickly she pulled back, but not before Marshall caught the blush on her face. Okay, let's find science, he said with a grin. Their high school was a small one. It could be worse because the high school several towns over was at least 5 times as big as this one. The first thing they did was do a sweep of the science lab, and as they crawled along the floor, Marshall realized with a blush that Fiona was wearing a skirt when he caught a glance of white panties. I'm going to check the back room, he said quickly, standing and nearly hitting his head on the table as he did so, before hurrying from the room. Fiona watched as he walked into the supply closet and shrugged as she continued scouring the floor for science. Marshall looked at his reflection in the mirror near the sink. It was definitely pink, so he would definitely be looking in here for science until his face was a normal color. Hearing a rustling, he glanced over, noticing a food bag on the floor with a hole in it and a pig tail poking out. Reaching out, he tugged the bag, and in an instant, science ran, making Marshall swear loudly as he hurried after her. Fiona, science is heading towards the door, he shouted, watching as the blonde began hurrying after the tan and white rat. Together they raced out of the room, Fiona quickly pulling her sweatshirt off before throwing it and shouting in success as it landed on the rat, who began squeaking in panic. As Fiona dove and grabbed her, Marshall stopped. Marshall tried stopping, but to no avail, and almost immediately he hit the ground, landing on top of Fiona after tripping over her. Mission accomplished, she shouted as Marshall laughed, pushing himself up as not to lay on Fiona while she held Science tightly against her, wrapped in her sweatshirt. Mr. Abadir, Miss Mertens, what in Glob's name are you doing? In their commotion, they'd forgotten that classes were still going on, and both gave each other a quick glance before realizing what a compromising situation they looked to be in with Fiona on the ground and Marshall on top of her, especially with both of them red-faced from chasing science, and now from embarrassed blushes knowing the teacher's assumptions. This is so not what you think it is, Marshall said quickly, getting to his feet and pulling Fiona up. Yeah, we were doing this for science, the blonde said, simply trying to hold on to the struggling rat. What kind of science experiment is that? The teacher snapped. Both of you! Detention for... And then she screamed. For a moment earlier, Fiona dropped Science in shock as the rat nipped her finger. Both of you have detention for the next 2 weeks. And flashback. It's a good thing my mom wasn't living with me at the time because she would have seriously killed me if she knew about that, Marshall said. It's a good thing my mom wasn't living with me at the time because she would have seriously killed me if she knew about that, Marshall said as he shrugged, taking another drink, watching as Fiona sat quietly. I actually was happy about the detentions, she said softly. Wasn't that rat fiasco like a few days before we met you? Moko asked, piecing it together in his head, remembering the argument Fiona and Bubba had had about why she ran away. Ignitus spoke up. Let's not talk about this anymore. How about that stink bomb barrage that wrecked the second floor main hallway? Who did that? Ignitus said, looking around. Oh, I did that too, Fiona said, taking another drink. Only because I asked you to. It wasn't exactly what I asked for, Marshall said as Fiona cut him off. Hey, you asked for a distraction and I made you one, the blonde said simply. Those were the terms of the agreement. You gave me all artistic control of said distraction and paid me $5 to do it, so you got what you got. Her smile was deviously wicked, and seeing this, the guys looked to Marshall. So what happened, Marsh? Ash asked the other two listening along as Marshall shook his head. He was in trouble. Marshall had a presentation due 2 classes from now and he forgot to do it. Okay, so he kept pushing it off until he couldn't anymore, but that's not the point. He needed somebody to make a distraction for him during 4th period. Then the idea came to him like a flash of lightning. That new girl Fiona had first lunch, and from what they'd been discussing via text, she was into pranks. Maybe a prank would distract the teacher for long enough that he could avoid doing his presentation and get off scot-free, or maybe he could earn enough time to actually do it. Keeping his eyes open for her, Marshall spotted the blonde walking down the hallway, and hurrying up, he caught up with her. "Hey, Fiona, I so need a favor," he said the moment she stopped at her locker. The blonde looked slightly weary, but nodded. "Okay, what's it you need?" "A distraction in B320 near the end of fourth period. I don't care what it is, but it has to be something big." Fiona looked to the side thinking and closed her eyes for a minute. "Yeah, I can do something like that. I get complete control." "Anything you want." "Okay, but it'll be $5. "Why?" "Because I have no lunch money and I'm hungry." Hearing this, Marshall sighed and dug through his pocket, handing her the money. "Expect your distraction 10 to 15 minutes before the period ends." "All right, thanks, Fiona." "No problem, Marshall," the blonde said, watching as he made his way down the hall. Fiona knew just what to do. The real question was how to go about doing it. Marshall sat in class, tapping the eraser of his pencil on the desk as he glanced from the teacher to the door of the classroom, waiting for something to happen that could postpone his presentation. Suddenly, the door to his classroom opened, and a familiar voice was heard. "I'm so sorry I was late, Professor. I was coming from the other side of the building, and there were just so many people in the way, and I promise it won't happen again." It was Fiona waltzing into the class and sitting in the front row. She wasn't even in his class, and the teacher stared at her in confusion. Though it seemed the blonde had walked into the wrong classroom, Marshall felt as if he was 2 seconds away from banging his head on the desk. He told her near the end of class, not the beginning. Pausing after sitting down, the blonde turned in her seat and looked at the class before making eye contact with Marshall. He watched as she glanced at the ceiling, and looking up, all he noticed was a vent. "Young lady." "Oh, I'm so sorry. I think I'm in the wrong classroom. Isn't this B322?" she asked, sounding disturbingly innocent as she did so. Marshall had to admit she was good, even as she came in at the wrong time. "No, this is B320. B322 is one more room up," he said. "Oh, I'm really sorry about interrupting your class," she said, grabbing her bag once again and walking out of the room. Marshall watched as she walked from the room, but instead of going right, which would have led to B322, she went left. "Okay," the teacher said, scratching his head. "Where were we again? Oh, yes, presentations. We'll start in reverse order this time. So, Nancy Zepp, you're up first. Marshall Abadir, you'll be last. I'll call everyone as their turn pops up. Nancy?" Marshall watched as the presentations went on, some long, some short, and he was bummed. Now would have been the perfect time for Fiona to walk into the class and interrupt everything. He had to give it to her. It was an okay attempt, but not worth the $5. "Marcus Barron, you're presenting next. Marshall Abadir, you're on deck," the teacher said from his seat as Marshall nodded. He could always pretend that he lost his flash drive or something. It was then that he smelt it, the atrocious yet familiar smell of a stink bomb, only this was worse by a lot. Marshall watched as the odorous green swirls of mist began floating down from the vent in the ceiling, and hearing a slight scraping noise, he watched as 4 silver packets skated under the door, filling the room with a noxious scent. Marshall coughed, listening to the clatter of students hurrying for windows for air, and he, being one of the smart ones, headed for the door. The hallway was a breath of fresh air, and down from the vent the hallway was a breath of fresh air, and coughing violently, he glanced over, spotting Fiona and a hall monitor in the middle of a heated argument. "I'm telling you, I just saw them and kicked them. I didn't know what they'd do," she argued while the teacher glared at her. "I watched you slide those things under the door." "Fine, give me detention then. Oh my glob, I'm gonna sit after school for a whole hour. This is devastating. It'll kill me to be here," she said, oozing sarcasm, and Marshall watched her with a smirk. Fiona really was a fearless, fiery little thing. Making up his mind, he walked over to the monitor, who looked like he was about to have a conniption, and spoke up. "I asked her to set off the stink bombs. Can I have detention too? My conscience is eating me alive." "You can't just hitch a ride on my detention," Fiona snapped. "Watch me, Blondie," Marshall said with a grin. "You flippin' weirdo." "Enough! Both of you, detention for the next 3 days. You, Miss Mertens, for the stink bombs, and you, Abadir, for picking a fight and getting on my nerves. Now get back to class right now," he demanded angrily, writing their names in his book for detention. Fiona walked off down the hall, and aiming to avoid the smelly room, Marshall followed her. "The hell is that for?" "The hell was that for?" Fiona asked, glancing over at Marshall. "Because I felt like it. Do you have any intention of going to detention? He asked, watching as the blonde stopped to take a drink from the bubbler as she held her hair out of the way. Yeah, she said, standing. I don't mind detention. I like it better than going back to where I live, she said absent-mindedly, though it suddenly seemed that she understood what she'd said because she tensed up. What, don't you get along with your foster parents? Marshall asked, remembering the conversation they'd had when he first met her. I just don't like being along with my foster dad is all. I mean, my foster mom gets home after 4 most days, so it's only an hour and a half, but still, there's something about him I'm just not comfortable with, and I don't know what it is. Marshall stood in silence, watching as she drank from the fountain again before he spoke. If you want to hang out after school with me, you can, he said, throwing it out there. For how long? The blonde asked after a moment of silence, turning to look at him. For as long as you want to, Marshall said with a shrug. Okay. And flashback. That explains a lot, Ash said with a shake of his head. That hallway leaked for a good week. Of course it did. She put stink bombs in the air vents, Marshall said with a laugh. I was the prank queen until I had to move, Fiona said with a grin, her face feeling hot from the alcohol and her head fuzzy. She watched as the guys laughed, swapping stories, telling jokes, and making fun of each other. They all seemed fine, though in comparison to her, everything was a little dizzy, and Fiona was most definitely drunk at this point. It was then she realized she had cookies from earlier in the kitchen. She was alone for no more than a minute when she heard a voice behind her. You okay, Fee? It was Marshall, and she smiled as he wrapped his arms around her. Those stories seem to bum you out. Even FP noticed, so that means something, he said, resting his chin on her shoulder. I'm okay. I just hate thinking about that. Before you, being in the foster system, all that stuff. I mean, I hate thinking of him too, and anything that reminds me of it. That's understandable. All that stuff makes me think of my birth parents too, and thinking of them makes me happy and mad all at the same time. I mean, why didn't they want me? Finn remembers them, so why was it that when I was born they didn't want either of us anymore? I mean, if they didn't give us up, then I would have grown up with a brother, and I wouldn't have been bounced from place to place and hey, it's okay because you have me. If they hadn't given you up, we never would have met. You wouldn't have your awesome parents and you wouldn't have Jake for a brother. Everything would be so different. For that I'm glad. I wouldn't change my past or if it meant anything would be different now, he said softly, trying to soothe the overwhelmed blonde. But haven't you ever wondered? She asked softly. I wouldn't change mine if it meant anything would be different. I wouldn't change mine if it meant I would never know you like I do, but I just want to know why. Why didn't they love me, Marshall? She sounded so miserable, and Marshall felt so bad. He didn't have an answer this time for her. Not yet, anyways. They did love you, Fiona. There's no person in this world that could ever not love you, he said softly, making this up as he went along, finding truth in his words as he spoke them. Your parents did love you, Fiona, and they loved you so much that they knew that if you stayed with them, you wouldn't be safe, that you would be hungry, and they loved you so much that they wanted a better life for you than they could give. That's why they gave you up. That's why they gave you up. It wasn't that they didn't love you enough, it's that they loved you too much and knew that if you stayed, your life would not have been better. That has to be the reason, Marshall said softly, listening to her shuddering breaths. Turning in his arms, Fiona hugged him tightly. I love you, Marshall. I know, I love you too. I'm tired. Okay, let's go upstairs then. You don't have to come. You can stay downstairs with the guys. No, I want to be sure you're okay. They can wait a few minutes. It definitely won't kill them. Hearing this, Fiona nodded as she walked from the kitchen, cookies forgotten, and made her way up the stairs. She could hear Marshall speaking quietly in the living room, and the moment she flopped on the bed, she could hear the sound of Marshall climbing the stairs. Moments later, he was on the bed with her, feeling as her arms wrapped around him, squeezing him tightly. Leaning over, he kissed her forehead, then both her cheeks, before finally kissing her lips. You know I'm not going anywhere, right? I know, the blonde said sleepily. I know it's later, too. This made Marshall laugh. We can have later, he said with a grin. Okay. Marshall lay there listening to the sound of the blonde breathing before he spoke again. I did wonder, about what life would be like, he said softly. Yeah? Mm-hmm. I like this option a lot better, he whispered. Sitting there in silence for what felt like the longest time, Marshall listened to her soft breaths as she slept silently. Carefully, he stood and walked from the room, careful not to wake her. For some strange reason, though, it never failed to surprise him how sensitive Fiona could be to things. With that thought, he closed the door, heading downstairs to finish the night with the guys. Alright. Well, that was awesome. I really love that. So I gotta go. I'm gonna go, but I'm gonna do some more recording today, and, I'm doing a couple of other videos today, and they're not gonna be the next chapter, but I might record the next couple chapters today. The next one's gonna be 3 chapters in the video, and then I'll probably go back to like 1 or 2 chapters at a time, except for burst uploads. So I will see you guys later. I love each and every one of you guys. Please don't forget to always be yourself. Um, oh, I'll be bringing you guys the next chapter probably tomorrow. I love each and every one of you guys. Please don't forget to always be yourself. Be good to yourselves and to others. You are valid, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.